Hey everyone, it's Courtney Barriger, your host of Environmental Style Now, the A to Z podcast on all that is sustainable fashion. Coming to you today live from Landers, California, land of the landroids. If you have to ask, then you definitely do not know. Now, our special guest today is Courtney Moran, a professor and lobbyist for hemp agriculture exemptions and overall badass. Now, she's here to tell us about why hemp is the tree of life and what we can do to help make it a cash crop again in the United States. Hey, it's Courtney Barriger, and this is ES Now. Today I'm with Courtney Moran, Chief Legislative Strategist for Agricultural Hemp Solutions and Legal Champion for Hemp Agricultural Development. Hemp is one of the most useful plants on the planet. It is a carbon-capturing monster and easy to grow. But legal red tape has put the damper on its popularity among farmers in the U.S. Hear how Courtney is leading the charge to change all of that. Let's jump right in.
So why don't you tell me a little bit about what you do in the hemp industry?
Yeah, I am an attorney and a lobbyist. I work on both state policy and federal policy, and I mostly work on legislation and rulemaking, but I also work on a lot of compliance matters and administrative appeals if folks need something and we're trying to really kind of set precedent.
How did hemp become so important to your life? How did you become an advocate and lobbyist for it?
Well, when I was a senior in college, I was given a book called The Emperor Wears No Clothes. And it was written by Jack Hare, edited by Chris Conrad. And the book talks all about the history of cannabis, the conspiracies as to why it became illegal, all the environmental benefits, the uses for the plant, and I just couldn't believe what I was reading. You know, I grew up in the DARE program. I was told and taught how awful cannabis is. And then here I get this book and see that, oh my God, this crop can clean up toxins out of the soil and make thousands of sustainable products. It was just it was insane to me that this crop was illegal because of marijuana, which that shouldn't be illegal either. But so when I went to law school, I looked around for opportunities and I saw that National NORML, the National Organization for Reform of Marijuana Laws, was having an internship, a legal internship. And so I contacted them and I ended up interning for their founder, Keith Straub, during my second year of law school. And so that's how I started meeting different folks just in the cannabis industry. And after law school, I moved to Oregon and started doing work in criminal defense, medical marijuana criminal defense, but I knew very quickly that was not what I wanted to do because my passion was really hemp. And so I actually went back to school. I earned a Master of Laws in Environmental Law and focused my whole program on hemp law before there even was hemp law. And at the time is when the adult use legalization measures were passing in Colorado and Washington. And, seeing that there were states that are starting to legalize marijuana, our Oregon congressional delegation was very supportive of hemp and marijuana. But one of our Congressman Blumenauer, wrote a letter saying if these new federal guidelines will apply to states like Colorado and Washington that have legalized marijuana, shouldn't they also apply to hemp? And our Oregon U.S. attorney said yes. And so we started having conversations in Oregon about developing a program. Unfortunately, that fell apart even after the 2014 Farm Bill was signed into law, which started up our hemp research programs in the country, all because our land-grant university, Oregon State University, was afraid of losing their federal funding if they started growing hemp because of the federal prohibition on marijuana. And so what I started doing, I just said, okay, well, I just had gotten out of my Master of Laws program. I wanted to fight for this. And so I started hosting educational events. And at the event, I had a farmer speak who had been at a previous seminar that the that the congressman had put on the previous fall. And so that summer, he and I decided, you know what, let's apply to get him a license from our state Department of Agriculture. And so we applied, but they denied his license because they didn't have rules in place. And so they ended up putting me on the Rules Advisory Committee. The denial was in July of 2014. They put me on the advisory committee in August of 2014. We had rules drafted for the program by December, and we had the first license issued in February of 2015. And I know this is a long story.
No, definitely.
So right when we get the program up and running, unfortunately, there was issues between the marijuana industry and the hemp industry over cross-pollination. And the marijuana industry actually tried to get the Oregon hemp program shut down for 2 years. And so just as a citizen advocate, I was reaching out to the legislature, contacting them and trying to get them to understand, what a true cross-pollination concern was, and to get them to not pass this bill. And it caught the attention of the House Majority Leader and another representative. And they invited me to come down and testify at a hearing. So I went down and I testified. And in the audience was one of the farmers who was going to have to lose his license and his crop because he had already planted his crop at this time. Mm-hmm. And he heard me testify, and he ended up hiring me on the spot after to be his lobbyist to shut this bill down. And so we did. And he was able to grow that summer in 2015, and 9 farmers actually grew in Oregon in 2015. But then the Department of Agriculture and Department of Justice started putting new parameters on the program. And so we immediately formed the Oregon Industrial Hemp Farmers Association, which is the association that I am the president and lobbyist for. And we worked with all the stakeholders, and we developed a plan. We went to the legislature, and in the short 4-week session of 2016, we passed one of the most comprehensive hemp bills in the country at the time. And so that's really kind of what set things forward in Oregon. The Oregon Industrial and Farmers Association has passed 5 bills since we formed in 2015. We've set up the entire framework for the Oregon program. And in 2016, after we had passed this bill in Oregon, other states saw what I had done, and they started just calling me and asking me to come out and help them. And so I started just going around the country and writing legislation and, helping folks in states pass bills and working with departments of agriculture to set up programs. So I started, working all over the country. And then fortunately, I was in Oregon, and Oregon Senator Ron Wyden had been, an incredible champion for hemp on the Hill for over a decade. And he had actually attempted to pass, he introduced federal legislation to legalize hemp a few times. But every time that he'd put a bill forward, it was just this kind of blanket remove hemp from the Controlled Substances Act, didn't set up a framework. But so we started meeting in 2016. We started drafting the language in early 2017. And I worked directly with his office and the office of Senator Mitch McConnell, who's from Kentucky, on the language of the Hemp Farming Act. And the Hemp Farming Act of 2018 was the language that was then included in the 2018 Farm Bill that federally legalized hemp.
Wow, you are a badass.
I'm just passionate. I just really care. I really care about this plant, and I know what it can do. I've seen what it can do for small family farms. I've seen how it brings people together. I see the creativity and the innovation and the courage of folks that are starting up new businesses, trying to build out the supply chain. And everything that we've talked about. I mean, the benefits that it can have on so many different industries, on our soil, for our farmers, for the planet. How can I not?
How is even, deregulating hemp relevant right now?
Well, it's extremely relevant. We have issues with supply chain, with the crises that are happening all over the globe, and we have an opportunity to have incredible materials being grown and manufactured right here in the United States. And further, with the issues we are facing with the climate, hemp is an incredible renewable resource when it's grown sustainably. It can be grown with regenerative agriculture and can provide thousands of sustainable products from the crops being grown.
I'm just curious because I know nothing about it. What is all the red tape? What's going on there?
So we did legalize hemp in 2018 with the 2018 Federal Farm Bill after 80 years of prohibition on cultivation of the plant. There was a research program that started in 2014 with the 2014 Farm Bill, and then we moved to full commercial production in 2018. But the rollout period has actually taken some time. And so it actually wasn't until January 1st of 2022, this year, that all states and tribal governments are actually operating under that 2018 Farm Bill authority. And so it took USDA, well, they actually moved the fastest, but USDA put out rules. The first iteration, these interim final rules, were very problematic for the industry. We went through rulemaking periods and public comment periods, and USDA put out rules that are much better than they were. They're actually functional on the ground for the farmers. And so that's what went into effect in January. But we still are having regulatory issues with FDA over a variety of products, from animal feed to the CBD products that are very popular on the market, and other new cannabinoid products that are just entering the marketplace. And then still having issues with DEA over the legality of different products, even if they are derived from hemp.
Wild. So what happened 80 years ago to shut it down?
Well, it was actually a slow process, really over almost 2 decades, 3 decades. But in 1937, the Marijuana Tax Act was put in place. And what that did was levy a tax on different activities regarding cannabis sativa. And there were different levels of of taxes put forward. And it was another hurdle. It was burdensome, and it wasn't really intended to create hurdles for true industrial or true medical cannabis use, but the effect was really just kind of instating this blanket prohibition against the cultivation of any cannabis domestically. And so when that happened, public perception started changing. We entered the Reefer Madness era. The movie Reefer Madness came out, which was a campaign really to instill fear among consumers and those consuming cannabis or thinking that they're going to. And so it was different, not only legislation that was creating hurdles, but public media that were creating issues and a whole new view around this plant.
I've never seen that movie. I feel like I should watch it. I feel like it'd be really educational of that time period.
It is, but I mean, it's alarmist. I mean, the people are going crazy after they're smoking cannabis. So it was to drive fear. And it was interesting because as the Marijuana Tax Act is getting put into place and these Reefer Madness, fear tactic campaigns were out, meanwhile, science and industry are seeing incredible benefit for it. And there's this magazine called Popular Mechanics Magazine, which put out a couple different articles that covered hemp, and one of them was titled The $1 Billion Crop, talking about all of the different uses for hemp at the time. And at that time, they estimated that there were over 25,000 uses.
Oh my God. What? 25,000
Yes.
uses.
And that was then. Now we think we have so many more.
Wow. What, like, let's just name some of them just off the top of our head. Like, okay, obviously rope, fabrics.
Right.
You can make plastics out of it, like a version of
Yes.
like a plastic material.
Yes.
What else? What are some other uses?
You can make fuel, biodiesel, ethanol. You can produce batteries. You can make biocomposites. You can make construction materials, of course. As you mentioned, textiles and clothing. You can make soaps. You can make food. You can make pretty much anything that you can imagine can really be made out of it. I mean, there's still research that needs to be done about, is it load bearing and other specifications for different products. But it's really incredible what can be done. I mean, if I look around my home, even, I have sheets and blankets, I have clothes, I have soap, I have food. My car has biocomposites of hemp in it. So it really can be a part of everyday life. Paper. And that was actually a really big thing, and something that had been studied by USDA at the turn of the century in 1914.
That is so long ago. Yeah, that's just crazy that it just got shut down. I mean, what are some common myths about hemp versus marijuana for people who just don't even know the difference?
Some think that marijuana is female and hemp is male, when they are both. They are both male and female. Of course, when folks are growing marijuana for smoking or most traditional consumption, you are growing the female flowers, but it's not just one is the male plant, one is the female plant. That's a very common myth. And, what's really distinguishing under federal law is a THC concentration, so that psychoactive or intoxicating compound found within the plant. And there's a variety of tetrahydrocannabinols, but it's this delta-9 THC that the current law is based on. But otherwise, all cannabis is cannabis. And we're delineating it out right now by that THC limit. But we're actually trying to work federally to change some of those delineations.
So what part of the plant is hemp? Just curious.
Well, so it will depend, I would say, how the federal definitions go. But hemp traditionally is non-intoxicating cannabis. And so if you look at it scientifically, it's a plant that has genetics that are, of course, predetermined, but that will produce a plant that has more CBD than THC in the plant. So it has these cannabinoid ratios of what will genetically determine if it's intoxicating or not. And there's different schools of thought, but there's a few different classes or varieties that will, that look to, is it truly marijuana? Is it hemp? Is it cannabinoid hemp? Things like that. But from kind of more of what you're asking about, I think is more when we start talking about grain and fiber. And so it isn't the way that the law is based and the way that the industry is based right now. It really isn't about what part of the plant. It's just what variety of plant is considered. And right now it's only based on that THC concentration. But historical uses were always really grain and fiber. And so using that stock to make the textiles or make construction materials, make the paper, and the grain used to make food products and oils.
Wow, I had no idea that it was based off of, the type of THC or, whatever kind of distills from it. The new laws, the deregulation that's kind of rolling out this year, is that based around the level of THC as well?
It is, yes. Yeah, which the industry is, not happy with the current federal definition. And so we're trying to actually increase that level to a more science-based regulatory program.
Are the concerns, what are the concerns of the government in general?
We still don't have federal marijuana legalization, full cannabis legalization. So until we do, we're operating under this, THC-based framework. It's fear-based, right? What's the fear and risk-based? What's the risk of THC? And so until we get to a point where Congress is willing and ready to fully legalize cannabis, we're going to have issues. And so part of it is that this threshold that's set federally, which is at 0.3%, it's arbitrary. And so not all genetics will meet those thresholds, even if they're really non-intoxicating genetics. And so folks, a lot of breeders have done a lot of work breeding genetics that will be compliant, but farmers still have issues. We have farmers that have to have their crops destroyed. And so we're really trying to get that changed. But the other thing that we're trying to do right now that I'm particularly working on is a hemp exemption. And that is to actually exempt out grain and fiber from these regulations because they don't have those levels of THC that are concerning or potentially concerning.
Oh, that would be so interesting. So you could essentially grow any type of hemp because the important part is that you're taking from it, the product doesn't really have THC in it.
Right. And so, the way that we're setting up the framework federally is that you would not be able to use the floral material. You couldn't extract any cannabinoids, but you can use that grain and you can use that fiber to make industrial type products and food products.
Interesting. What would the waste product of that be? I'm just curious. Would it be like leaves and roots? I have no idea.
Yeah, it depends on how the plant is harvested, but you'd have roots. The stalk would get used hopefully for some sort of purpose. If you're growing for fiber, you're really growing for that tall stalk. If you're growing for grain, you're growing for the seed. And so when you harvest that seed, it will, a combine will go through the field and then capture the seed, but then it throws out the rest as waste. So that's, any floral or leaf material. And then the stalk could just be left in the field to rot or to rot.
Gotcha.
So that, So that's how it gets rid of the flowers, by retting it in the field.
And that kind of goes back into the soil and enriches the soil. And yeah, that sounds
right,
very
exactly.
reasonable. Super, super reasonable. Where in the world is hemp mostly grown?
Well, it's grown all over the world. The United States outlawed cannabis in the 1930s, and other countries followed suit, but not all countries stopped producing. So China, I don't believe, has ever outlawed cannabis, and so, hemp, I should say, for grain and fiber uses. And so they have a very robust fiber industry. I know India, Romania, they have fiber industries. Canada has historically grown the most grain and been the largest grain export around the world. France, Denmark, the Netherlands, they also have fiber industries and are starting to have some cannabinoid industries. Switzerland has a bit of a cannabinoid, at least they're a great cannabinoid market. So it's grown all over the world. It's just different countries and different regions are growing different varieties just because of the way that the varieties they have, but also the way that the plant will grow at different latitudes and in different climates.
That's fascinating. What if we were to grow more in the US, how would that impact the environment or the sustainability movement?
Oh, I think it would be incredible. of course, I think what we expect to see is that farmers will start growing hemp in rotation with other crops. And so it won't be replacing, but it'll be supplementing. And when it's grown, it can remediate soil, meaning pull up toxins out of the soil. It can aerate the soil. It provides a lot of different benefits. We can make biochar, which is also very, very helpful for the environment. And so I think that if farmers start doing that, and especially with certain different crops, they can get higher yields after they grow hemp. They may have to use less pesticides, less fertilizers, just depending on what they're growing. And so I think we'll just see a transformation if and when farmers do start using it in rotation. Right now, I think we're still in our infancy. And since 2014, the majority of production has been around cannabinoids. And a lot of cannabinoid production is more horticulture than agriculture. But as we start to see more infrastructure for grain and fiber being built and developed around the country, and then more farmers will start growing it and actually not only growing it just because they want to grow hemp, growing it in rotation with their other existing commodity crops, that we're just going to see, I think a very beautiful world and something that's going to be very helpful for our farmers.
I was just interviewing the guys behind Kiss the Ground. They're this project that they're basically teaching farmers, new old ways to farm that's just more sustainable. And they mentioned crop rotation, and they also mentioned in that crop rotation using plants that are resistant to insects, so that you don't even have to use pesticides. I think hemp would definitely fit right in with that kind of program. That's so cool to me.
Yeah, every crop's going to have at least probably some pest, right? Hemp does have some pests, but if you're growing them in rotation, right, you're stopping those cycles, integrated pest management. And so it's just like when you have your own garden at home, you don't want to plant tomatoes in the same place every year, right? You want to move them around the garden because they take up the nutrients, and you don't want, if there were any disease there, right, you want to break that up. And so it would be the same thing with hemp and probably with the systems that they're talking about.
Yeah, so cool. I wonder if this does take off, how do you think it will affect in America just the fashion industry?
Well, there's a few companies that have been around for, honestly, actually a couple decades, that have been importing fabrics, a variety of hemp fabrics from around the world, I think mostly from Asia. And, there's kind of been like these niche shops and designers that have been using hemp. But once it becomes more affordable and more accessible, I think we'll see more sustainable clothing being used and built. Hemp is, it's an incredible fabric. It's durable. You can have a variety of different blends, just like you do with other materials. And, I've heard it can be like antimicrobial and other things like that. So I think it could be really great.
Yeah, you mentioned to me that there's also a hemp silk, and there's also a hemp denim, and then there's obviously different t-shirt weaves and jerseys and stuff like that. It's actually pretty incredible. There aren't many fabrics out there that can do that many things. So to be able to make it here and source it here, and also get reap the benefits of it clearing carbon, I'm like, how can we get this at the top of the ballot? How can we talk more about this and less about even, yes, the marijuana is important too, and decriminalizing marijuana is absolutely it's been ridiculous and needs to be taken care of. But the trickle down effect of that is even better than anyone's even talking about.
It's so true. It's so true. Yeah, in the media, marijuana has been a lot of the hot topic. Just it's the sexy topic, as everyone in the industry always says. But, the long-term value really of this plant and opportunities with this plant, I see, are with the grain and fiber. And, with those stalks, we can do so many amazing things. And you're right, how many different blends of fabric can we make? I mean, how many other products can we make? I think it'd be great to see the fashion industry come out and really make a statement with it. There's companies like Patagonia. They have been using hemp in some of their materials. Different shoe companies, like Adidas, they've had hemp shoes. Other major brands have had some of these products, but it's kind of these like one-off novelty products. But if we started seeing, designers including it in in their portfolios and in, just using these with the blend like you've been talking about. I mean, I think, hemp is this amazing, incredible thing, right? It's been living within this community so far, and the industry's really worked hard over decades to build it up to what it is now. But really, the long-term goal is to just see hemp as another ingredient, that it doesn't have to be such a big deal. And if we start using it every single day and using it in as many products, that's when we're going to have that really amazing environmental shift with hemp.
That's going to be an amazing day, hopefully, probably in our lifetime. I would like to believe in that.
I would like to believe in that too.
and this is what you're doing, at least right now with your life. As a teacher, as a professor, as a lobbyist, as a lawyer, how can individuals, at home, participate in this, and how can we, what can we do to move this forward and make this future that we want a little bit closer to now?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing you can do, in your everyday life is buy hemp products. Money speaks, right? We can talk with our dollars. And so by going to the store and choosing the options that have hemp in them, that are using hemp as an ingredient, that will be step number one, right? Because it's showing that we're going to be choosing these products and that there's a demand for them, right? If there's a demand, then it's going to engage the entire supply chain, and then that gets down to the farmer. And, the other thing, I mean, for what we're working on specifically right now, I mean, those in the textile industry, those in the fashion industry, those in the automotive industry, those in all of these other, and even, the airline industry, these larger industries that are using, potentially non-sustainable materials right now that could be supplementing some of their materials with hemp, we would really love them to engage with us on our federal advocacy efforts. The 2023 Farm Bill is coming up, and it's a great opportunity for us to see further reform for hemp and to get better, certain grants put our way. Be able to get clarification about this, 1% THC within the Farm Bill, or, for the work that I'm specifically doing on grain and fiber to support the hemp exemption campaign. And so we have a website at hempexemption.com, and it talks all about what we're trying to accomplish for grain and fiber. And so the direct impact is going to be on the farmers. But of course, if things are easier for the farmers, more farmers will grow. Their administrative fees will be decreased, and if fees can decrease for the farmers, then that can obviously create benefit throughout the entire supply chain.
That's so cool. Companies that are already using hemp to join up. So some of the big ones.
Or even ones that want to engage with hemp, but because of some of the regulatory issues we've had to date that may have been reluctant, this is an opportunity for you to help us continue to open up the door for this incredible crop.
Right. I mean, especially like major brands like H&M and Zara that have a sustainability policy. Why not? This is
Exactly.
It's going to make everything more affordable for everyone.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's a call.
Yeah, and the other thing too is that if some of these, fashion and design brands started making more, more designer clothes with hemp and styles with hemp, maybe some of the stigma and stereotypes around it would start going down. If people are seeing like, oh, I can wear this and look how great I look in it, that might change a few minds.
Yeah, I absolutely love like Patagonia and their work clothes. I bought a pair of overalls and they're made out of hemp, and I was just like, I was so excited to see that I was like, yes, take my money. Absolutely. Like,
I have those too.
Yeah. They're great. They're the best.
Yeah, they are. I love them.
That's so funny. That is so great. Okay.
Yeah.
Are there any emerging technologies that you're excited about?
Oh, well, the industry is constantly evolving. A lot of folks are really excited about biochar opportunities. The new things that folks are looking into is different opportunities with carbon sequestration. And, long term, I think many of us would like to see fuel being made from hemp. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to say about that, especially given that, we don't really have a way to dispose of car batteries, like for electric cars. We're not really there yet with electric cars yet. Like, it's still not sustainable. I agree.
Right.
Like, that would be so cool. I'm just like, what you're saying, I'm just like one-upping. Yes, I agree. And yes, 100%. A little bit about you.
Well,
sorry, go on.
Well, I was just saying, you can make batteries also out of hemp. And so I don't know if the technology is there to make a car battery out of hemp. I know other batteries have been made, supercapacitor batteries. So I'd be very curious if the industry has gotten that far, or if these auto companies and battery companies have even looked at that. But I think that's something also for them to consider.
Oh my God, could you imagine the car, like its sides are made out of hemp, its tires are, whatever, made out of hemp, and then it's like fueled by biofuel, and then it also has a backup battery made out of hemp? Like, what?
I buy it.
I would absolutely be cruising around in that. I'm sure it would be so expensive, it'd be insane, but I would work up and I would get it. Like,
me too.
That's just, it's insane that one plant can do that many things. Is there anyone whose work in your field you admire?
I admire a lot of folks in this industry who have, staked everything on this. I have a dear friend who, her name's Janelle Ralph. She's the CEO for Palmetto Synergistic Research with the Harmony brand, and also for the Botanical brand. And she started her CBD company because her daughter has a disease called lysencephaly, where the top layer of her brain did not form. And, she was having hundreds of seizures a day. She wasn't expected to live, past a few years old. And she just turned 13. And, they've been giving her, they tried a variety of different pharmaceuticals. They didn't work, and, she was getting sicker. And then Janelle found CBD, but the product she was getting at the time, just, they would have other toxins in it. They might have heavy metals or pesticides, or maybe they had THC in them. So she ended up starting her own company, and she's done incredible work around the country. I've worked with her on policy. She's helped a lot of families, and she's just built up, a very positive reputation in the industry for what she has done to help advance the policy and, set a positive example for testing and verifying what's in your products and making sure you have safe manufacturing practices, good manufacturing practices. And she just kind of goes above and beyond. So she, I admire her and what she's done.
That's so beautiful. which sustainable brands, if any, would you recommend?
You know what? I have a friend, and she actually developed I know you said apparel, but now I'm thinking she developed a hemp towel company to really bring back hemp into kind of folks' everyday lives. And her company is called Enact. And so if you want to look for some, towels or washcloths or things like that, she would be someone I would definitely support.
Oh my God, terry cloth. That's one of the things that we didn't mention. Like, it's another hemp fabric. Like, oh yeah, terry cloth. I didn't even know that was possible. Like,
yeah, they're incredible. They're great for drying.
Where can we connect with you online?
Yeah, so I would ask folks to go to hempexemption.com. That's the big thing that we're working on right now. My entities are Agricultural Hemp Solutions.com, OregonHempFarmers.com, and EarthLawLLC.com. And they each have their own social media accounts as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. This was really illuminating and interesting.
All right. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Have a great night.
You too. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
A huge thank you to Courtney for coming onto the show. Thank you so much for your dedication to bring the magical crop of hemp back into the mainstream. I would drive that weed car any day. Now you can follow the development of her cases at earthlawllc.com and follow their Facebook and LinkedIn of the same name to keep up with their stuff on the daily. That is it. Thank you for listening, and that's a wrap.
Hey, this is Andrea in Cedar City. ES Now is a Holding Court production and is written and produced by Courtney Barriger. Music is by Parker Ainsworth. Fact-checked by Justin Howard. And a special thanks to Alexandra Shuck.